I read a story last night, the police commissioner of Boston. You said you doubled down on not helping the law enforcement officers of ICE. I'm coming to Boston. I'm bringing hell with me.
Oh, yeah, that is Tom Homan at CPAC. Jonathan Fahey is joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. Jonathan, of course, a former acting director of ICE. I mean, you must have heard that. And, you know, if you're a border security loving, low illegal immigration kind of conservative, you want these guys gone. You want sanctuary cities to be, you know, what's the right way to say this? You want the bad guys to be shown the door. What did you think when you saw Tom Homan say that on over the weekend at CPAC?
I think it's great for a couple of reasons. One, which this administration is doing such a good job on the messaging and sort of the public facing on this. It is such a strong deterrent for people that are thinking of coming here illegally. And we've seen, you know, you report on the numbers at the border, they're so low now. So that part of it's very effective. Also, it's a message not only to Boston, but all of these sanctuary cities that if you're going to continue this game you're playing, and it is in fact a game to keep criminals in the country solely despite Donald Trump, it's a pretty remarkable thing. But I think it puts not only Boston on notice, but all the other ones on notice too. And I think a lot of them are going to be starting to fold without any fanfare. They'll just start cooperating. But what a lot of these sanctuary cities are doing, you know, they have really been engaged in harboring illegal aliens, which is a federal felony, which if you're doing anything to basically encourage them to reside in the country or to make it, you know, to shield them from deportation, harbor them, I forgot what the other word was, but basically trying to prevent them from being deported and encouraging them to stay when you know they're here illegally, that's a federal felony, and they've been getting away with it for a long time. And so once they start opening up criminal investigations into some of these cities to determine exactly what they were doing and what the extent of what they're doing, it's not going to be worth it for them to maintain it. So, yeah, the short answer after the long answer is it's fantastic, and the messaging is awesome on it.
I don't know if I've ever seen an administration that has been so good at messaging. I mean, I've been watching politics for a long time. You used to work in the Trump administration and in the first Trump administration. And it is really clear that they learned a lot in the 4 years that we had Joe Biden. I mean, the Trump administration, the people that are working currently in the Trump administration, they watched the train wreckery of the Biden administration. And let's face it, Kayleigh McEnany was outstanding at the end of the first Trump administration. And so I think we see this administration being able to defend themselves by going on offense.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, they're effectively aggressively going after these issues. And it's really interesting because it's almost like they have the energy of a first term, but the wisdom of the second term because, you know, they had that 4 years in between. And it's been so effective. And you really compare that to the, you know, the whatever you want to call the Biden presidency or whoever's presidency that was, but it really was just a dormant stage of just nothing going on. And you just see this not only action, but effective messaging. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, they take shots at Donald Trump from picking people that were on Fox News and stuff like that. But the point is quite good. It's like messaging is important and transparency is important. We didn't have either one from the last administration. We had no transparency. And like it or not, and no matter how they want to criticize Donald Trump or, you know, if they get something wrong here or there, but it's like they're out there every day messaging and taking questions so that the American public is far better informed of not only what they're doing, but also what they're trying to do.
So one of the big news stories out there today, of course, I'm sure that you know, is this email from Elon Musk. It was sent to a bunch of, it sounds like all federal employees. And you heard me set it up, basically saying, give us, 5 bullet points as to what you accomplished last week. And if you don't, well, then we'll consider that your resignation. And big controversy. You've got all of these folks within the Trump administration telling their employees not to answer the email. And even Kash Patel said, you're going to put a pause on this. And so you have a situation now where you've got Elon Musk fully supported by Donald Trump, and you have all of these agency heads also. Donald Trump fully supports them. And it seems like this is going to turn into, I don't know if you call it call it a crisis within the administration, but clearly there's a disconnect between what Elon is doing and what the agency heads like Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth and others are telling their employees not to answer this email. How big of a deal is this, do you think?
I think the media is making more of a big deal out of this, but I do think it makes sense. There is probably natural tension, right? And with this administration, you do have strong personalities and stuff like that. So the tension between agencies and between people isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it leads to better decisions and better policies. But I do think the good thing about doing it is, hey, people should be conscientious about what you're accomplishing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. However, there are lines of sort of, communication and authority and things like that. So if you're working with, if you're hypothetically somebody in the Defense Department, you might be working on one thing that week, and for one person that relates to something very specific at a very micro level. It doesn't mean you did nothing that week. It doesn't mean you didn't do the other four things. So I do think there's tension. I do like the idea of consistently sort of being on top as an employee and as somebody that's in management to be able to say, hey, what am I doing? To be thinking every single day, what am I doing? What am I accomplishing? Setting goals, achieving goals. All of those things are good, but there is tension. The media is going to blow it out of proportion. But Donald Trump, I think, has he's appointed people in charge of these agencies that are in fact in charge of the agencies. So I think the line of communication will go from the agencies to Donald Trump with strong input from Elon Musk. But I don't think it's as big a deal. But they're gonna, as they're gonna try to anything they're gonna try to blow out of proportion, and the media tries to create drama where maybe none exists or maybe it's only minimal.
Well, I don't. So here's my take on this is that, number one, I've obviously worked in the private sector for my entire career, and at almost every job, and Jonathan, you're in the private sector as well. I don't know if you have to justify your existence by, telling your bosses what you accomplished this week, but at every single job that I've ever, believe it or not, ever had, I have had to fill out reports as to, now as a middle manager, what did you do this week? How did you make the radio station better and so forth? I don't think there's anything wrong with give some specifications as to what you're doing to make the country better. Justify your existence. Tell us what you're doing. It's all about accountability and expectations, which really was a big part of what got Donald Trump elected, number one. And number two, that is what Doge is all about.
Yeah, I think that part of it is spot on. You should always be working to, justify not just your existence, but to also show value or to create value in the private sector for your clients, for your customers, for your boss. And Elon Musk, whatever they want to say about him, there's nobody that's been more successful in business just based on the numbers. He's the richest person, I believe, ever, even when you factor in, cost of the dollar and everything like that. But it's like, it totally makes sense. And you're right, in the private sector, you don't get away with just doing nothing for very long without somebody saying, hey, what's up here? So I think there is, it makes sense to be thinking that way. It's just really the sort of the lines of authority and things like that. It's going to be interpreted as, the people in those agencies as being undermined by somebody from the outside. And how does that affect the agency, the morale and things like that within it? Those are things that also have to get factored in. But the idea is a very good one.
Let me ask you this. There's all of this current state of lawfare against Donald Trump, right? So everything. How are you able to keep track of all of the different lawsuits that are being hurled at Donald Trump every single day? Are you able to keep track of all of these, or do you just wait until it goes to the Supreme Court and then at some point we'll have a ruling?
I think it's hard to keep track, and sometimes you almost forget about them. People talk about them. I was like, oh, that was the New York Civil one or something. But you're right. There's been so many, and that's what makes this so bad and so hard to defend on the Democrat side. When there's so many of them, they really lose the plot when they try to suggest it's not political. It's like all of a sudden out of nowhere, he's hit from different states on different theories that have never been tried before all over the place. It's so transparently, was political. So yeah, it is hard to keep track of. I really, a few of them are sort of going through the appeals process. Who knows what's going on in Georgia, but it is really just a shameful period, I think, of our justice system that hopefully we're moving forward and getting out of it, because it was just so destructive on multiple levels. And one of the most notable ones is all the attention that was not focused on things that mean things to the American people, their own safety, their own, things, their own quality of life was totally put aside for these political agendas.
All right. So big news. Apparently, the Epstein list is on Pam Bondi's desk, and it possibly could be released today. Maybe it could be released this week. This is something that is a very big deal to a lot of people. Can I just tell you what my concern is? Because I don't know what's on the list, and nobody really knows what this list is, except it's names of people that were possibly clients of Epstein. I want to know who's on that list if they did something wrong. Is there a possibility that there's people on that list whose names could be exposed that actually did not do anything wrong? They just, maybe they inquired, they got on the list somehow, but they never actually went to Epstein Island or flew on the Lolita Express. Is there a concern that innocent people could actually be wrapped up in all of this?
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing she's going to be grappling with. If there's somebody on there and there's no reason to think they did anything wrong, is it fair to put their name out with the implication that they did something wrong, and not just something like that's kind of bad, it's something that's really bad. So I do think that that's a real concern. And when I was at the Department of Justice, one thing that we were very careful about is if somebody wasn't charged, you mean formally charged, we didn't put their names in documents. So if it was like two people were in a conspiracy or a few people are in a conspiracy, you would refer to the other person as, co-conspirator one or something, even though they might in fact have been guilty of something. But if there's not enough to charge them, you didn't put it out there. And that was sort of, viewed as a fair way to treat people. And believe me, I knew of a lot of people that did a lot of bad things that didn't get publicly out there because you view it, hey, if you don't have enough to charge them or enough to convict them, that's the system. So I think that is really the tension there. Believe me, I'm very curious who's on it because the behavior seems so grotesque, and it seemed almost like public within a certain circle that this was going on, which is also, grotesque as well. But there is that fear that it's like, hey, if your name is released and it's on there and you didn't do anything wrong, you're still irreparably harmed reputationally, and I don't know how you ever recover from that. So I think that's probably what she's sitting there discussing, I assume, before things get put out there, because you have to be mindful of your responsibility as a prosecutor that has this information, when you put it out there, what the effects of not just the person directly out there, but their family, their coworkers, their community, all of these people are affected by it.
I will say though that I believe that there's anybody who can do this responsibly, because I believe that the public does have a right to know if there was sex trafficking involved in all of that, and clearly there was. I believe that Pam Bondi can do this responsibly and still satisfy the government's, or I should say the America's, right to know what's going on. I believe that she can do it. I believe that she can do it responsibly.
Yeah, I think she will, and she has, with all of these nominations, people always, the left just takes hits at them. But you look at her career; she's been a prosecutor at the state level, at the lowest levels to the highest levels. So she knows how to handle that responsibility and manage it. And I think my suspicion is she will come out with a judicious way of doing this that protects all of the interests. It won't be perfect, and people will complain either way, but I think she will do it as responsibly as it can be done. All
right. Jonathan Fahey, how can people follow you on Twitter?
John for Fairfax. JON for FOR Fairfax.
I do appreciate you joining us here in Nashville on Nashville's Morning News.
Well, thanks for having me. Have a great day.